This is a fourth episode and we don't have a theme song, so I'm singing this silly tune. Oh yeah! And hello again, everybody, and welcome back to yet another edition of the Minsk and Friends Speakeasy, where the Merlot is actually just mayonnaise. I'm your host, Minsk.
Hey, it's Joonatan.
And it's great to have you again for our fourth outing this time, episode 4. Hey, we're doing pretty good on our track record so far, eh?
We haven't quit yet, which is always positive.
Yeah, I mean, 4 is already kind of a routine, so that's promising, isn't it?
Yeah.
And guys who watch the episode art will be happy to notice that Joonatan is now finally also in the art edition. He has been added to the counter of the speakeasy. I didn't get any feedback from any viewer or anything, but I just personally was feeling more and more bad about the fact that my co-host did not feature in the actual art of the program. So now that's fixed.
Hooray. I am valid. I am legitimate.
Yes, indeed. And if someone is wondering, well, Minsk, you bloviating canard, why did you not have him there in the first place? I actually didn't want to upset Joonatan by drawing a shitty picture of him. So I just hunkered down and did the best possible picture I could, which is okay.
Yeah, well, it's fine now. I like it, so.
Yay, I hope you guys at home like it too. So today we have a bit of a departure from the way we've done the last episodes. We've had a big topic in our first 3 episodes to chew on. Today we have more of a selection. We are going to have a 3-game topic to go through that we'll try to kind of skim over. We've done a bit of a show and tell, if you will, as we've both played a game ourselves that we're going to share to each other and to you, the viewers/listeners around the world. Before all that, before we jump to the 2 games that we are coming in fresh on, we're just gonna talk a little bit more about Doom Eternal, with our darling of the season, I guess. One of them, anyway, because now we have both experienced them quite well, and we still have a few things to say about it. Last episode, we talked briefly about it, but here's gonna be a little bit more digging into that. The first thing I wanted to ask about is, you were saying, Joonatan, that you were going to have a look at the multiplayer, which is something we didn't get around to originally. Did you get a chance to try out Doom Eternal's multiplayer?
I did. I went for a couple of rounds with it, and it's very much similar to what the Doom multiplayer in the previous one was.
Right, 2016.
Yeah, and then they have another mode which is about the players can spawn as super tough bad guys in the single player campaign, like in the same way as in Dark Souls. And that one was much more interesting, but I didn't get a chance to do that because I just didn't find anybody who wanted to join my game.
Right. I don't remember that ever happening to me when I played the single player. I don't remember any player controlled demons showing up. Is there some kind of opt-in thing for that?
I think there's an opt-in, and I'm not actually 100% sure if that's in yet. It's just it's supposed to be coming back, or supposed to be coming in, or was supposed to come in some time ago, but I haven't heard much about it, so I just went and looked around and tried to see if it was there, and I did have my online settings all put open, but nothing showed up. But that's the one that I might go still back later in the year and see if they've updated it, because that's the one that sounds like the most fun version of the multiplayer. The battle mode, which is the 2 versus 1 thing, where a fully armed Doomslayer faces off against 2 player-controlled demons in a best of 5 first-person match. That one was, again, it was okay, but it wasn't really anything to write home about.
That's my general feeling with the multiplayer in Doom in general, and that's a little unfair because Doom does have a fair bit of history with multiplayer. I mean, there was LAN deathmatch already in the original game, but it's just kind of not what I'm personally interested in.
Yeah, and it's one of those things that, while it may have been there before, or was one of those first ones to have it. It's just something the time kind of has passed it by, and I kind of feel that it doesn't need it.
Yeah, I mean, Quake 3 Arena and then Unreal Tournament, I think, were the evolutions of that kind of just deathmatching running around. So I guess Doom Eternal, with this whole alternate battle modes, is trying to come up with something that's a little more in-depth than just you were in an arena and you blow up the other guy. But I have to say, I just, in the first place, I'm not enticed by the concept at all. That's why I didn't really look into it in the first place at all.
Yeah, it wasn't anything great. It's not bad. It's not great. It's just kind of there, and I don't think I will. If it wasn't there in the first place, I wouldn't have missed it.
Yeah, absolutely. If there's folks who are really into that scene, great. I mean, no skin off my back, but I'm content with the single player, and I think that is what we want to dig into really here is the single player. Oh man, it really did held up for me throughout. When we did the actual episode, I was only a third into it. Really solid all throughout. The pacing ramped up greatly. I was happy to notice, although I was playing Ultraviolence and I was really stressed out, somehow that stress did kind of vanish throughout, which I think is a sign that the supplies you get, the new weapons and gear and stuff, and just your experience increasing actually really did curve out nicely, and the challenge stayed perfect throughout the length of it. I don't remember any really awful parts that I got stuck on throughout it. Of course, the infamous Marauder notwithstanding, you're not really stuck so much as you're slowed down in those encounters, I guess.
Yeah, I think my only big issues were with the Marauders. Those were the ones that I just didn't enjoy in any way.
Yeah, we talked about that some length last time in our preamble of our previous episode, but I was on the opposite team of this, actually, with pretty much everybody. I really did enjoy the encounter with the Marauder and also the subsequent encounters, because it still was crazy fast for me, because those windows for hitting the guy are really narrow, so I thought it was kind of fun. It kind of was rocket taggy in that sense that I had to get that hit in at the right time. Of course, it is a total kind of twist from what the kind of regular gameplay loop is, and the fact that it's kind of a semi-regular feature, I totally see where people who don't like that are coming from.
Yeah, and I remember reading, I went and checked out some forums where people were talking about how this so-called fun zone where you're supposed to be in to land hits and to try and not be hit yourself, that it was driving a lot of people really angry, because one of the good things about the 2016 Doom was the fact that you could essentially just run around the place like a madman and leap and fire from anywhere.
Yeah, that's true. I didn't think about that, but that actually introduces the kind of playing footsies, to borrow a fighting game term. You actually need to consider your spacing on top of everything else in the Marauder encounter. But yeah, I have to admit, a lot of my love for that character was not just a gameplay thing, but the fact that the lore behind this character and just the kind of the presentation involving the Marauder. I really think it's cool that they introduced what's basically a rival character. He's the closest thing to an evil Doomslayer in this game. He's got the same background as the Doomslayer. They've both had the same trials. He just went with the dark side. They've got similar gear. He's got a shotgun, just like the Doomslayer. Their armor looks the same, and just the fact that it's a humanoid enemy rather than a humongous demon dude, I think that's really neat. Oh yeah, and the fact that they both have pet dogs, kind of. You have that spirit dog, and he has a awful bloodhound that comes after you.
Yeah.
So that's like what really appeals to me. And that's why I also agree that I would have liked less encounters with him to preserve the impact. You've gone on record saying that just the one boss encounter with him would have been great. I've been mulling on it, and I think it would have been perfect What you really need for a rival encounter is that you have 2 boss fights. 2, maybe 3. Just to first time appreciate how tough the guy is, and then once you're deeper in the game, to have like the real showdown with the character. So imagine, if you will, that first time you fight the Marauder, and you beat him, and you get the glory kill prompt. Imagine if like the glory kill animation starts and Doom Guy like sucker punches the Marauder, but then when he like goes for the kill, it's actually the Marauder who strikes the Doomslayer down, and it's like a complete subversion of how glory kills have worked thus far in the game. And then while you're like kind of squirming on the ground, the wounded Marauder like limps off into a portal, muttering like, "This resolves nothing." So imagine how primed you then would be, like, oh my god, I'm gonna have to have another fight with this guy. And then it could have been like a proper boss fight with more just, some sort of alternate mechanics as he's souped up. I think that would have been like the perfect follow-up to that encounter.
I guess, yeah. I mean, my issue was just how the gameplay mechanic with him felt. So I think for me it would have been just like, oh geez, I have to fight him again.
Yeah, but I'm imagining like round 2, of course he like gets new mechanics. Like maybe halfway through the fight he'd lose the shield and get like some kind of new trick. But you'd get to open up on him a little more, but like he would also open up on you more, so it would just turn just that much more aggressive, that second encounter. That's what I'm like imagining in my mind.
Yeah, that would at least be better, because it would be a changing up the thing, and it's certainly going to be worse than the second to last boss that the game has. The flying demoness. Oh,
okay. So you did not. You weren't a fan of that one?
I just thought it wasn't as fun as it could be. I mean, they were both the last boss and that one. They were both kind of letdowns because it wasn't. I don't know what it was about them, but at that point it did feel like it was just kind of grinding.
I can kind of see that, and I was annoyed with that second to last boss a little bit at first, because that kind of ramps up that fight with just adding more and more shit that hurts you throughout the arena as it goes on, and that's a little obnoxious to try and avoid that. But I thought the loop was okay in that boss in the end. Because I found basically the boss's Achilles heel. Pro tip: try rockets when you need to open up the fight. She is pretty open to those. But yeah, I can see that. Yeah, it was. But it was still an okay fight for me. I thought the second boss, which was kind of this story heavy boss at the end of a story level, that was my low point. And I think also I'm a little different from the majority view on that as well. I think a lot of people like that throwdown against what's kind of also a Marauder, a shield carrying boss. That did not hit with me, that fight. It was annoying, that one. I don't know, how did you feel about that one?
I'm about the same as you. I really didn't get into it in that level. I was into the game, but like all the other stuff kind of was like, don't care.
Yeah, I have to say that's my biggest gripe with the game, is that level. And I kind of hate to say it, because I did like that they were trying all this interesting lore and build a Doom mythos, and somehow trying to tie the original games to the plot of this. Because Doom 2016 felt like it was a reboot of the plot. With just like some weird references to the original games, but you're not quite sure if it's the same universe or is this just cheeky referencing. This one actually tries to arc tie it all. And that's interesting, but I didn't really like devoting a whole level to plot cutscenes. That felt, well, I didn't hate it at the time, but when I look back, I feel like that felt a bit like padding in the game.
Yeah, it was a little bit, and it was superfluous. It wasn't really necessary, again, for the story, and because they didn't really push it into any way, or they didn't push it any further in any other aspect of the thing.
And the thing is, right after that level, you get a second level where you have to get the Doom guy's, like, his ancestral weapon thing, and that also features all these, like, cutscenes to what the Doomslayer went through before he became the Doomslayer. And I feel, I've been thinking about it, those two levels I think could have been put together, and I think it would have worked better to have an actual proper level with the cutscenes from that kind of story level integrated. Maybe tighten it up a little bit as well. That's my biggest problem, is that pair of levels. Because right after that, then you go to hell then, basically, and that's, again, just maximum Doom at that point. Crazy, hellish architecture, relentless demon onslaughts, really cool platforming. One of the most metal tracks in the games plays through those levels. That was, again, I was again back on the train at that point.
Yeah, absolutely.
But apart from that, like, the stuff that I don't like about the game is really me, like, nitpicking about things. Like, forget the Marauder, I thought the Archvile was a massive disappointment to, the returning from Doom 2, one of the scariest monsters from that game, and kind of not an interesting monster, kind of a lame gimmick with summoning monsters into the arena. And it doesn't even get a cool intro or anything. You just fight an Archvile in one level, and okay, that's his intro. I don't know, do you remember the Archvile enemy at all in the game?
I don't, actually, and because I don't have any kind of frame of reference for him. I don't remember him from the original games either. So he just kind of came and went as another enemy in the story.
That's what bothers me as a old fan. And not to mention, I don't know if you remember, but the 2019 QuakeCon gameplay trailer featured this incredible intro for the Archvile at the end of the gameplay trailer. They play like this amazing cutscene that really hypes this enemy up, because I think id Software knew that that's a popular enemy from Doom 2, so they hyped up the return of the Archvile in that trailer. That cutscene is not in the final game, and I was really disappointed, because I recognized the level from that trailer where the cutscene plays, and he doesn't even show up at that point of the game yet. And I was like, that's a bummer.
Yeah, that's usually why I put very little stock into any kind of pre-release gameplay videos or any kind of those hype videos, because they are inevitably always somehow bullshit.
Yeah, I guess that happens. I guess I didn't really actually watch very many trailers. I don't usually watch too many trailers if it's a game I know I'm interested in, because I want to maybe avoid spoilers for something I know I'm getting into. But for some reason that got me back in 2019, and I guess I fell for it. But again, that's like, I'm nitpicking about these little things, like, oh, I wanted my favorite monster to be cooler. Like, I don't have many more complaints more substantial than that.
Yeah, I mean, and if these are the biggest complaints, then it's usually not a bad thing for a game to have, like, minor things like this monster wasn't as cool as it could be. I mean, that's not bad.
Yeah, I know, exactly. Like, that, if it leaves you wanting more, or like something, usually that's a good sign. I mean, of course, if there's nothing good there, then it's too bad. But obviously, this game is great, as we've gone with great length to. So the fact that I just want things to tuned a little bit more is really a compliment in some sense to the game. I don't know. Do you have any big negatives still to share? Our first episode was very, very praiseful for the game, so I might as well give some negatives still here on our return to it, to give a bit of an even shake to the game.
I don't really have any of that kind of major gripes about it. Like, I think I went them through when I reviewed it, that it was just some of the levels get a bit grindy, and that last couple of bosses are not great. But those are really minor complaints.
Unfortunately, I can't go into the final boss too much because of avoiding spoilers, but that's another case, kind of like the Marauder, where I felt like, okay, the gameplay wasn't the craziest thing in the world. It was a pretty cut and dry fight, the final boss, but the way it relates to past Doom games is super cool. So I really enjoyed the final encounter of this game as a player of the old games.
Yeah.
But I guess for someone who doesn't really remember them as well, I guess it just felt like a pretty plumb standard final encounter, didn't it?
It did. It was not, and especially since they kind of left it open again to, hey, we're gonna be coming back for a sequel and for a sequel and a sequel. It to me felt like that all the stuff that they were trying to build with the story was kind of useless because, let's face it, their Doom never has been story heavy.
No, not really. The one time again, Doom 3, and really the exception to the rule that proves the rule. That's again one of the least popular parts of the franchise is story heavy Doom 3. So
yeah.
Actually, I have to say that also is the ending was pretty lame. It was just like, well, job done. Can't wait for new Doom 3. I'll look forward to it in 2022 or something. Okay.
Yeah.
That's kind of how 2016 ended as well. It was kind of just a bunch of teases at the end. I guess it's par for the course, because the first Doom basically ends with, okay, cool, you're on Earth. Oh boy, I hope no demons followed you to Earth. Oh, and then Doom 2 comes
dun, dun, dun.
Yeah, so I guess in that sense it's typical for the franchise, and really if you're in it for the gameplay, I guess the ending can take a hit if it helps out the gameplay, if that's what you need to focus on. So, yeah.
Yeah.
But overall, yeah, this is, if it's not my game of the year, it's going to be pretty close to the top. This hit all the right notes for me. So, good on you guys at id for pulling off one of the wackiest FPSs I've ever had the pleasure to play.
Yeah, we'll see what happens when they come out with the next Doom. Although I don't know where they're going from Doom Eternal as a name, but
Doom Nexternal? No, that sounds pretty.
We'll leave that to the marketing team.
Yeah. Why don't you guys spitball on that for a while?
Yep.
Okay, well, moving on to our second feature of today. So, this was because I don't think there's any huge releases at the moment of games. We're in a bit of a lull at the moment, would you say?
Yeah, I think the next big ones that are coming out are going to be The Last of Us 2 in just about a month, I think. And then Ghost of Tsushima in July.
Yeah.
Then the fall is going to be... Autumn is going to be much more packed. We have like Cyberpunk coming out, unless it gets delayed again. There are the new Crusader Kings, and a ton of other games that have been, as they ramp up towards the end of the console year, when we have the new consoles and new games that come along with them.
That's the big event, obviously. But right now, it's been a bit quiet. It was incredibly dense early spring. Again, Doom, Final Fantasy, Resident Evil, something else I'm probably forgetting. Well, Mountain Blade that we talked about. These all landed a while ago. A bit quieter for the moment, so we didn't really latch on to anything big at the moment for an episode, but both of us did play some releases on our own, and we decided we'd do like this kind of little share to each other what we played. And I have to say, the game I tried out on a lark is really solid. The game I will be talking about is Streets of Rage 4, the 20 years in the making? No, closer to almost 30, I think. Yeah, the follow-up to the classic beat-em-up series by Sega, Streets of Rage. The fourth part came out. I played through it. I think it's awesome. How are you, Jonathan, on beat-em-ups? Are you familiar with the genre?
I'm relatively familiar, but I don't really play them that often. I notice I'm not very good at them. Does something like Bayonetta count as a beat-em-up? I guess.
That's an interesting question. I guess I'm kind of such a neophyte in the genre. I can't really say with any confidence either. I feel like Devil May Cry and Bayonetta and those kinds of games, sometimes they're called, I know a lot of people use character action game as the genre title, and I know someone coined stylish action, because the varying up your moves and combos are really important in those. I think those might be an evolution of a beat 'em up. I don't know. Because also there's Yakuza, which I'm, of course, a fan. I played through Yakuza 0 on the channel. That, I think, fills the beat 'em up criteria. The way I see it, it's a lot of like fighting game mechanics in spacing and using moves at right times and kind of reading the enemy, but instead of a human opponent, you are fighting lots of AI opponents. And that's how I would describe the genres kind of tells. Maybe.
I guess so. Yeah, well, in that case, I'm not hugely into them. Yakuza I have played and I've kind of enjoyed, but I don't think I've played any of the beat-em-ups since something like, the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles games.
Yes, those are really good ones. Yeah.
Yeah, like old ones like that. It's just a genre that I don't like. The fighter games like Street Fighter and stuff like that, I will play like if I'm at an arcade or like once in a blue moon if I grab like a cheap copy from a sale. But they've never really been a thing that I got into.
I have a lot of ways I'm the same way. I do feel like because beat 'em ups were so ubiquitous back in the 90s in arcade games. So I tried Final Fight in the arcades back in the day, and I'm not sure about Streets of Rage, but I have friends who are huge Streets of Rage fans, and it's kind of the SOR is kind of the doom of its genre, the kind of genre example. So I know the series pretty well. So in that sense, I'm a lot like you. And also what you said that you don't feel like you're very good at them. I feel the same way, obviously because all those arcade games were designed to be pretty brutal to entice you to stick in a lot of quarters in them. And I never really had a bunch of quarters, so I never got very far in any arcade game. I don't know about you.
No, I don't think so either. I think it was just like, as a kid, you played it for 5 to 10 minutes, and that was usually it.
And you were lucky if you got to third level, basically. First level is usually pretty simple, and then the second level immediately ramps it up for the player, I think is the way it goes.
Yeah, usually.
So in that sense, I kind of, when I want to talk about Streets of Rage 4, obviously fans of the genre, I think, have all of them have already gotten this game and played it, because word on the street is this is like a great follow-up to this classic Sega series. So as a kind of a dabbler in beat-em-ups, I kind of want to make this review for people like me who might be concerned, like, I don't know if I can handle a game like that. Streets of Rage 4 is really tight gameplay-wise. It's got that same simple but robust beat-em-up gameplay of the original series. But it is very friendly for a casual player in sense that you don't have to start all the way from the beginning in the game if you game over. You absolutely can just jump back to the level you were in. And if you lose, there are options for like making it easier for you. You can pick like extra 1-ups or extra special attacks at the start of the level, and or you can just pick the difficulty to be lowered. So in this sense, this is a really good game for someone not into the genre to also like try it out. It's pretty forgiving in that sense. The levels themselves, they are challenging. I got stuck on a couple of levels for a good long while, because the other thing is you don't unlock any new abilities or anything. The moves you have at the start of the game, those are everything you're gonna need in your toolbox. So it's just a matter of like the ramping up of enemy types and environmental hazards and stuff, like dealing with those. So they will challenge those levels when you play through them, but it's because they're short arcadey levels. It's never a hassle to jump back into that level and play back through it. It's really nice in that sense, and the story is also really simple because it's always simple in these beat 'em up games. The original Streets of Rage, there's an evil syndicate led by Mr. X, and these vigilantes, street toughs, go out to stop the syndicate. And Streets of Rage 4's plot is literally that Mr. X's children have taken over the syndicate, and now they're running the city. And his children are called Mr. and Ms. Y, the Y twins. So that's the kind of writing that you're dealing with in this game.
Okay, so it's not exactly high art there.
No, absolutely. It's a fun plot. I mean, it also involves mind control music to control people, which I think that's a really stock villain thing, especially in these kinds of more schlocky plots, is that the villains have music that they're gonna unleash on the unsuspecting public and it mind controls them. I don't know, I don't know, do you feel that way?
I guess so. I mean, without playing it, it's hard to say. If it works in the game, that's really all it really needs. And from what I understand from Streets of Rage, looking at because I went and read about the wiki page when you mentioned you were going to talk about it, it seems like the series has never exactly emphasized story in any way.
Now, there are some cool twists in this for fans of the older series. There's one boss fight in particular, which is... Well, there's several boss fights, actually, which are, like, returning characters from previous Streets of Rage, and they, like, kind of reference, like, oh, yeah, how these characters have grown since the events of the previous games, where they are now after... Yeah, I think it's 20 years. I think it's, like, the time in the game has also advanced 20 years, because the main guy, Axel, is now... He's a little paunchier than the first three, and he's got a bit of a biker beard going on. But yeah, I mean, the plot works in that it's just a vehicle to provide you an excuse to go from level to level in this city. All these crazy places like the docks, the police station, Chinatown. You get excuses to go to them. And in that sense, it works. And in that sense, again, I would recommend anyone who's never played Streets of Rage. This is easy to jump into because of its simplicity. There's some like references to past characters like you won't understand, like the fact that the level 5 boss is so hard is a reference to the fact that he's an early boss from a previous game, but the game never spells that out, so it's just for old fans to be like, oh wow, it's this guy again, and man has he toughened up over the years. But it's a really cool it's a really cool game overall, and I would really recommend this to anybody who is curious at all for these arcadey games. This is a really, really solid, fun game.
Yeah, cool. Is it something that you would recommend for basically anyone, even who hasn't played those kind of games before?
I would say, like I said, yeah, I would. But again, you have to go into it expecting that it will toughen up. Now, like I said, you don't have to start the game all the way from the beginning. That's the biggest demoralizing thing for me in these games. But you do have to, some levels will be tough and you will have to play them several times before you finally clear them. But I think in that sense, it's got a smooth difficulty curve. And the fact that you don't really unlock any new moves to worry about, you just have your little moveset to work with and kind of perfect throughout the game. The challenge comes from all the enemy types and kind of recognizing that, okay, this guy has pretty good anti-air, so I should not approach him by jumping at him. He's just going to knock me out of the sky. Okay, but there's other enemies in the same mix that I got to deal with, so kind of prioritizing who to attack and where to go to and deal with. And yeah, I mean, the final couple of levels I actually played through with not a lot of difficulty, and I don't know if it's just the game got easier for some reason in the final couple of levels. I don't think so, because they just kept making trickier combinations of enemies. I think it just really was a case of, by that time I had learned the ins and outs of the game. I could better respond to the challenges. So that's a really cool feeling to me.
Cool. Does it have multiplayer? Usually those things kind of live and die by that as well.
Yes, it does. It does have co-op multiplayer. I think it works over the internet, because when you're picking a character, you can hit like square. Even if you start at just story mode, you can just hit square in the character select to open up a online mode, so someone else can jump in and be character 2. I don't remember if there's 4-player co-op. There is at least 2-player co-op, because there's initially there's 4 characters in the plot you can choose from. So I'd have to actually check that, but at least 2 players can play it, and that's kind of the staple of the genre as well, is getting to goof around with your friend. It's still in there, and I haven't tested the co-op, but I've watched videos. People seem to enjoy it. It's certainly fun.
Okay, I will have to take a look at it.
Yeah. And presentation-wise, before I jump into the presentation, just the one thing about the gameplay that you also have to expect is that it is a short game. I beat it over the weekend. I think I have 4 hours clocked in. So if you just want to play the story mode once, it might be a little short for your tastes. Again, like I said, because you don't have to start all the way at the beginning every time you game over, it's a lot easier to progress, but because it is still designed to be a classic arcade game, it's not hugely long. It's actually a little longer than the previous Streets of Rage. There's 12 levels? Yeah, 12 levels. But it actually goes pretty quickly. So if you want a nice simple game, this is a great pick. But this is not gonna... unless you want to replay it at harder difficulties or try out the actual arcade mode where you have to beat it in one sitting, this is not gonna really hold your attention for very long. And I think it's kind of priced well for that. It's 25 euros at the moment, I think. That might be a little high for some people still for such a short game, but I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I think it's also because right now I have so many games on the backlog that a shorter game might actually be preferable to a longer one.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, definitely I enjoyed. That was a really good weekend I spent hammering through this game, I have to say. It's, okay, I said that I would recommend this to anybody. Okay, maybe not quite anybody, but I think if you're looking for a simple game, this is a really good one to go with. Now, the other complaint I'd say, and this is very subjective because this is really for old fans, is the art style might be a little contentious. It's not pixel art like the original 3 games. Instead, it's got this kind of cartoonish hand-drawn style for all the characters. Personally, I loved it. I think the characters all look really expressive, really cool. I dig it. But if old fans of the series are looking for a kind of a specific feel of the Streets of Rage, it might be a little bit vanished there, I'd say. I don't know. Have you looked at the character art at all for this game?
No, I haven't.
Okay, well, that's how it basically is to expect the kind of hand-drawn art you've seen in a lot of indie games in recent years. Not Cuphead, I don't mean that kind of art, not deliberately retro, it's actually very modern-looking. Again, if you're going for that old-school retro Streets of Rage look, then yeah, that's kind of missing from there. Although you can unlock the original characters as secret characters, a bunch of them, and they are still like pixely dudes. So you're running around as this old 90s pixel character in this lavish cartoon setting. That's a little weird, honestly, to me, but I guess it's there for the old fans. And one last thing, of course, I have to say about the presentation is the importance of the music. Streets of Rage, the soundtrack was made in 1 and 2 by legendary Sega composer Yuzo Koshiro. So those are big boots to fill. But it's got excellent, that kind of 80s, early 90s kind of synth-wavy music going on in this game. It is a really, really good selection of music. I have to give props to the main composer of this game, Olivier de Rivière, a French composer who has done quite a few games. His last big work was A Plague Tale, which doesn't really have much synthwave in it, being a period piece from the 100 Years' War. That's a different kind of music. But he clearly knows his stuff, because this one really nails it. Although he's not working alone here. Yuzo Koshiro is guest starring here, along with a bunch of other Sega alumni and other like classic Japanese video game composers. So again, also for fans of video game music, this is a really good tour de force. All the music is really expressive, really fits the levels well. I guess you kind of have to be into that 80s or that kind of arcadey video game sound. But if you are, this is a real treat, this game's music.
Sounds good.
Yeah, so that's my presentation of Streets of Rage. This was a kind of a surprise hit. I was seeing it trending well among people on YouTube, but it was indeed these kind of retro gamers. And I was a little hesitant at first because I was like, ooh, yeah, I don't know. don't remember ever beating a single Streets of Rage. I've watched a friend play that, and it gets really damn tough. But no, it's a really good package, this whole thing. I give it full thumbs up. I give it a full recommendation to folks.
Sweet.
So, that was my experience beating punks up in the Streets of Rage lately. Now, you had also been playing a recent release, Jonathan. Isn't that true?
Well, not really a recent release in the sense that it's the full game for this has been out for a while. I played the expansion pack for Control from Remedy.
Control by our fellow compatriots in Finland, Remedy Entertainment. Their surprise hit from 2019.
Yeah. I mean, it's a surprise hit in the sense that, like, it was received much on it got a bigger audience for some reason than their previous couple of games, which is weird to me because this is, I think, less accessible than their previous 2 or even 3 games. So it's really surprising that this one somehow captured the zeitgeist.
Yeah, I mean, that's why I say surprise hit, because no intention of me to stab Remedy in the back or anything, but I kind of feel like after Max Payne, Remedy kind of struggled to make another splash like Max Payne. I mean, Alan Wake is talked about, but I feel like it wasn't as big a thing as a Max Payne. And Quantum Break, while I checked that it did review pretty well, everyone seemed to enjoy the game, Quantum Break just kind of came and went, didn't it?
Yeah, and both those are a big shame, in my opinion, because both Alan Wake and Quantum Break are better games than Max Payne was. And Quantum Break was... It had its issues, but it was so... How would I put this? It had ambition, more ambition than most games ever do. And I think that just that alone would have or should have made it into a bigger thing than it was, because it combined a TV show with an action game that every chapter break you could watch an episode of a TV show that they had made specifically for that movie or for that game, and it was really good and it was really exciting, and the writing was generally good. It was let down by some wonky game mechanics,
right,
and really terrible boss fights.
Okay.
But I felt that those were not the things that, it should have, that people should have, given up on it because of those.
Okay, I have to admit I never played Quantum Break myself, and I do admit that when I heard about this TV show gimmick, that's what it sounded to me like a gimmick. I was a little leery, like, how's that going to work out? So yeah, I happened to sleep on that one.
Yeah, I enjoyed them both, and I've gone back and played Alan Wake a couple of times. Alan Wake is my least favorite in terms of writing, but it's my favorite in terms of the world and where Remedy started to really explore their own kind of personal touch of this kind of part David Lynch, part Twilight Zone, and, at the same time kind of laughing at itself for loving these things so much.
Yeah, it's certainly... Max Payne was just noir, or modern noir to the core. And
right.
Every other game they've made since then has had a very different tone to it, I'd say.
Yeah, and I'm actually one of those terrible people who likes Rockstar's Max Payne 3 better than the Remedy ones.
Interesting.
And I realize that I will lose my Finnish citizenship for saying that.
Oh yeah, I think, that might not sell well with everybody here. But no, I do remember that Max Payne 3 did review well. I remember that much. It's not like it was a lame follow-up to it.
Yeah, I personally love that the most. I think it had the most mature and well-written story, and it just in general was the most fun of the 3 games to play. That
was them making a game version of Man on Fire, wasn't it? That was way more leaning on that than the neo-noir of the first 2 games.
Yeah, it was. They like in the way that Max Payne 1 and 2 had their inspirations really heavily on display. Like you could tell where they were riffing off from. Max Payne 3 is essentially a big love letter to Tony Scott movies, like all of Tony Scott's movies, and then also movies like City of God were really heavily emphasized in that.
Yeah, right, exactly. That Man on Fire is the first thing I think of, like, that Max Payne reminds me of, the 3. But yeah, I can see that.
Yeah, and it's a great game. I go back every couple of years now actually and still play it because it is so much fun and the gameplay mechanics have not aged at all. And I kind of wish that Rockstar would not have disappeared down this miserable slog that is their Red Dead Redemption games.
Yeah, they are going hard on that, aren't they?
Yeah, and I'm not a fan of those at all. I think they're just terrible.
Mm.
I wish they would have just kind of hung on to this and gone more towards the fun, story-driven action games than this quasi-realism that they're trying to pull.
Yeah, I can see that. I haven't tried RDR2 yet. I know that the first Red Dead Redemption was, I got to that years after it came out, and it looked a little aged at the time to my eyes. I was like, this is what all the hubbub is about? Okay.
Yeah, it's one of the weird things that I did not like either of the Red Dead Redemption games, and I'm very much in the minority with them. They are like generally always reviewed well, and audiences seem to love them, but they just are like they keep me at an arm's length very heavily every time I try and play them.
It's probably, yeah, it's kind of, yeah, like you said, like what you're looking for in a game, like maybe that just provides the wrong thing. Because I do say RDR2 does look interesting to me. I have considered getting it at some point, so I'm not sold out on it, certainly, but yeah. But
back to Remedy's thing. Control. What I played, I played Control before. I reviewed it before as well, and now I worked reviewing the expansion pack, which is called Foundation.
Right.
And for those that don't know, Control is a story about a character called Jesse Faden, who arrives to the place called the Oldest House, which is a brutalist nightmare of a building that should house a bureau of investigations into the paranormal and the worlds beyond our worlds.
So a lot of maybe a little bit of X-Files riffing in there to some extent.
Yeah, there's a ton of X-Files stuff. It's almost like I feel like that if they could have had the license, they would have just made a full X-Files game at this point.
Ooh, that would be fun.
Yeah, and also it takes a lot of inspiration from the Internet Archives. I can't remember what the name was, but it's the Internet Collective where they collect like fictional horror and sci-fi lore that then people can expand upon.
Yes, I believe you're talking about the SCP Foundation.
Yes, the Something Containment Protocol.
Yeah, I'm aware of it. I read a few of them. They tend to have that kind of, I don't know what to call it, kind of internet sarcasm to them. That's kind of sells me off of things these days. That kind of,
yeah. The big problem with those is, and the ones that I've read, is that there are great ideas there, but because they adamantly refuse to have any kind of quality control or any kind of like any attempt to keep it all together. So anybody can, upload stuff there, which kind of makes it into having the same kind of problems as the Star Wars expanded universe did, in that people will come in and write stuff that directly contradicts other stuff or has been written because they didn't like a previous story they read, so they want to rewrite it to not exist. And I think a lot of that, because a lot of that has been lifted, not lifted wholesale, but so heavily inspired by as much as you can without having to credit them. A lot of that is in Control as well.
Right.
And all those problems that come with that have come into Control too, in that the story is, there is a lot of lore, there is a lot of ideas, and there's a lot of singular events that are really interesting and cool. But the big picture is messy, to be kind, like to put it kindly.
Right.
And that even though the writing by, I think, Anna McGill, who is one of the writers, along with Sam Lake, it's still, high quality. Remedy does still write really good dialogue and write really interesting and good characters. I feel like that because they did not have, or it doesn't feel like that they had a end game in sight, because they're still coming out with expansion packs. So the story has this kind of David Lynchian quality in it that don't go expecting any kind of coherent narrative that would make sense by the end.
And that's kind of pushed me away, just like the SCP Foundation's tone kind of didn't land with me. I haven't played Control. I might play it, but I've watched... It's Jesse Cox's, one of his favorite games. He is gaga about it, that man. So I watched a few of his videos, and the tone was very... And I hate to complain because it's by design, but it's it's unnerving and unpleasant in that world, a lot of the time.
I guess so. I never got the unnerving part because a lot of it is so... It makes so much fun of itself, or it tries to be so ludicrous that I couldn't get into the horror aspect of it. Because every time that there was a scene that was like, oh, this is pretty freaky or interesting, you would go to another room, and then the other room would be something like... One of my favorite examples is that there's a room that's just filled with post-it notes, and there's if you go and search the room, there's a note from one of the researchers, and it's saying that they opened up a portal elsewhere, and now a entity has filled the room with post-it notes and has claimed it for its own.
I see. Okay.
Yeah. So the tone itself is like with the SCP Foundation. It is all over the place. So there's no coherent nature to it. The main story itself has to do with twins, a brother and sister, who are both being investigated, or who have been both test subjects for this, and the fact that this thing, this vicious force is pushing in from another world into ours and is destroying the oldest house, which essentially holds the balance between worlds in place. And all that is kind of meh.
Yeah.
It's not as interesting as the other things that they've explored, and there's a lot of Stephen King into this as well, because they introduce a character called Ahti, who is the big Finnish pride for the season.
Oh yes, who I forget who played him. It's a famous Finnish actor.
Martti Suosalo.
That's right, Martti Suosalo, and he is cranking the Finnishness up in that role.
Yeah, it initially, the very first time I played it, it really put me off, because I guess it's fun if you're not Finnish, but when you are Finnish, having these things emphasized and pushed in, it really pulled me out of the game. And I know I'm, again, in the minority here, because many people seem to be loving it, and we're like, oh boy, this is a great character. It took me a long time to get into him, and once I think it was towards the very end of the game, when I realized that this is essentially Sam Lake's and Anna McGill's kind of love letter to Stephen King, and he has in his stories multiple characters that travel through all of his books, that they show up in short stories, and they show up in novels that couldn't have these characters because they go through time and space. And Ahti seems to be a love letter to that he is essentially a timeless creature that has shown up in all of Remedy's products, and in one way or another. And now with the new expansion pack that's coming out later in the summer, there's talk that it would connect to Alan Wake in some way.
Oh, okay. Interesting. Building the Remedyverse.
Yeah, and I'm a fan of those. Those are always a lot of fun, even if they don't make sense. And I think it's mostly because Stephen King has done this so well by creating his world with the gunslingers and with the man in black who travels through the stories.
Right.
So I think I like all that, and that is actually why a lot of Foundation works also for me, because Foundation takes place after the main story, where you descend into the depths of the known world, into the core of the planet, and it looks like this combination of Moria mixed with X-Files, with endless pillars holding the world up in eternal darkness, and then there's Ahti's summer cabin in there.
Oh, okay.
It's really silly and really wonderfully bizarre, and then as you go through it, this is where Ahti comes to relax, and then you go through it and you enter the foundational world that is between the realms, and there is a thing called the nail that keeps everything together. And all that kind of mythology, I think, is what Remedy does best. And when the game focuses on that, much in the same way as when X-Files focused on the conspiracy mythos, I am into it. All the other side stories are very hit and miss, so I couldn't care less. I could not care less about those. But Foundation works simply because it's all about the mythology, like all the time.
Interesting. It seems like that there really is like this setting building going on, so that seems like a really good stepping stone for making DLC or indeed straight up sequels, since they're setting up so many possible things in this wacky universe of theirs that could be followed up on.
Yeah, and like in terms of gameplay, it is the best thing Remedy has done. They've fine-tuned all the things that they've done in the past to a better degree than they've done it before. Like the shooting is a lot of fun. The superpowers that Jesse has are really great. It never stops being fun to be able to use telekinesis to pull like furniture to you and use that as like bowling balls to throw enemies around.
If I recall correctly, you can even like rip chunks of concrete just out of the ground and chuck those.
Yes, and then Foundation introduces new different kinds of powers that you can now manipulate the elements or the ground so that you can like create stalagmites to come out from the ground, and you can even like move entire slates of stone to create new walkways for yourself.
Oh, okay.
So all of that is really cool. It does feel that this is something that they've spent a lot of time perfecting, and it really works in this case. And the same thing with like the audio-visual presentation is like Remedy is essentially setting the bar in my books for other third-person action games, because the world of the oldest house and all the things like where the reality begins to bend on itself is just it's perfect. There's no else word for it. It looks like something that would cause Escher to have a panic attack when suddenly like this brutalist building begins to fold on itself, so that you walk through a door and suddenly you see the entire reality has shifted into a concave that then has folded 3 times more in ways that shouldn't be possible. But when you walk on it, the graphics engine is manipulated so that it looks completely understandable as you're going through it.
Oh man, that sounds like how much when Portal first came out and the way the portals worked with each other would mess with people's minds. That sounds like 10 times that.
Yeah, and I have no idea how they pull off some of the visual tricks in this, but it's absolutely gorgeous every single time.
Freaking hyperbolic geometry programming or something is my guess, man.
Yeah, and it's something that like I would recommend that if you get a chance to play Control, even if you're not into the story or that, you should play it at least just to experience the visual aspects of it, because they are just out of this world.
Okay, that sounds certainly exciting. And I do know that there's certainly some interesting music that plays in it as well. Well, most of it is very ambient, but I've heard one certain track which I believe plays in a certain important scene, which really seems to be a favorite of fans. I know that much.
Yeah, I think I know what you're talking about. But yeah, it has a good soundtrack. It's not as good as Alan Wake was,
okay,
which I think still has the best soundtrack from any Remedy game. And that's one of the things that Remedy is interesting about, is that even when they have a game that I don't get into as much as the other ones, it has elements of it that are always high quality, that they are still an interesting game studio because of that.
Right on. And we are not just because we are Finnish people, we are biasing it up here. We do truly think that Remedy is good. Like we said, there's some missteps with their stuff. I'm personally not huge on Alan Wake. I thought the silliness at times kind of ate up with the too much. It was a little bit too much for me, those sillier moments, like the stuff that the shadow villains say. But yeah, I think they're one of the better studios out there, Remedy. Just purely, yeah.
Yeah, it seems to be that silliness. It seems to be a very a finished thing to put into the products, and I don't know why that happens, because like it's that what we call insinöörihumori, so engineer humor, in that you take something that already is kind of silly or is already a decent enough joke, and then you just run it to the ground by repeating it. Star Wreck does this. Angry Birds did this. Every big one just adds this kind of thing into it, and I don't know why it is with specifically Finnish games that I notice it.
The first thing I think of when Finnish products are appearing on the global stage is gonna get some kind of insecurity. I always feel that Finnish people have some kind of global insecurity whenever Finnish stuff is on the global stage. So I think that might be some kind of let's try to play it up as a joke, so if it doesn't land, they'll think we're just not being serious. That would be my first guess, is what's going on there.
Yeah, that makes sense as well. And it's weird, because then there are elements like in Control, when Ahti is never treated as a joke, despite that he is a extremely overtly comical and stereotypical character. And I think because he's not treated like a joke, despite of this, is why he becomes such a compelling character towards the end. Because I was really worried that he would just become a joke of, look how funny these quintessentially Finnish stereotypes are. But then once you realize that it's a part of informing the character, it becomes more interesting than something like when in Alan Wake, when Wake continuously refers to Stephen King. And like even in the scene where he's being chased by an axe murderer, he even says, wow, this scene is like from The Shining.
I forgot about that, yeah.
Yeah, I remember when that happened, and I had to put the game down for a little bit because I was just so annoyed at how it's the kind of bad pointing and underlining in the writing that annoys me.
Yeah, you could have been more subtle with that. Something like, I feel like... oh man, what's the actress's name in The Shining?
Shelley Duvall?
Yeah, Shelley Duvall. Oh man, I feel like Shelley Duvall right now. Like, that would already be a little bit better.
Yeah, there are weird elements of those, and it's the idea of throwing in the kitchen sink and everything possible into the writing, which, you know, you'll get a bunch of hits, but you'll also get a ton of misses at the same time.
But overall, yeah, you do give Control a recommendation.
Oh yeah, Control and its expansion pack Foundation is really, both are really good. I would very much recommend playing them.
Okay, I will note that down, because again, that Finnish solidarity here, I do feel a little bad in not looking into it any further, especially that it is Remedy's big hit, finally, after a long while.
Yeah, I recommend it.
Great, that's excellent to hear. So, recommendations all around today, I'd say. So, I think we are about done with here for today. This was our, experimental new format here of doing a smorgasbord of games rather than our usual big topic. We don't plan these out very far, so we don't know what our next topic will be, but we will appreciate any comments telling how you liked the kind of more roundtable-ish theme of today. Tell us if you enjoyed it or hated it, or, I don't know, say a non sequitur. We'll probably find that amusing as well. So, any closing thoughts still to share before we close off for today?
Not really. What are you working on right now?
Well, business is as usual on my channel. Still just chugging along with those games that I'm playing. I recently finished recording Assassin's Creed. Those episodes will be coming out throughout the summer and whatnot. I really recommend it. I tried to go for this kind of informative thing, like I would look up real-world history and kind of go into what the real-world history of the characters and settings you go through in that game are, and I kind of tried to do a bit of edutainment on that front. I'd love to hear from people how they enjoyed me giving these little small lessons throughout the games. So if you're interested in at all in that, check out the Assassin's Creed episodes as they come out. Apart from that, business as usual with Tales of Vesperia. It's wow, this game just goes on forever. I guess that's how JRPGs work, don't they?
Oh yeah, I am just now starting the Secret of Mana, the Trials of Mana, and I am already worried that that's going to take me ages to complete.
Probably going to be a little lighter, being one of those SNES era games, and also not the company's AAA work. I mean, all love for the Mana series, but you can tell it wasn't the same like main focus that Final Fantasy was.
Yeah.
But yeah, what have you got shaking?
Well, I just finished up reviews that are coming out earlier, or starting next week. I played through Doraemon, which is the Japanese kind of Harvest Moon type of game from a beloved anime character, I think.
Oh yeah, Story of Seasons.
Yes, I just finished playing that one for a review, and then I got to talk with the game developers of a game called Before We Leave, which is the interview is coming out tomorrow.
So it'll be out by the time this episode of ours is. So go check it out on Jonathan's channel. It's Jonathan's website.
Right, and that's a mostly non-violent a city builder, like a 4x4 strategy game where you emerge from after the destruction of the world from nuclear fallout to rebuild society, and then eventually, as you know, the years and the decades and centuries pass, eventually leave the planet to find a new planet to settle on. I really love the game. It's really, really well made for such a small team, and for and how the presentation in it is just one of a kind. So I think we'll talk about that in the future.
Yeah, it sounds interesting. I will note that down. I haven't played any civilization-type games, I guess city builder type games in a while, so that definitely probably bears looking into.
Yeah.
All right, well, thank you again to all you folks out there for listening to our latest episode. I hope you guys enjoyed it as much as we enjoyed recording it. Next time will be sooner rather than later, but we will come out with more stuff in the future, so look forward to all of that. But for now, we are signing off for today. Bye-bye, everybody.
So long.